Howdy, everybody. Welcome to the stream team tonight. Uh, Keith, I think your mic is muted there. Keith, your mic's muted, I think, buddy. Anyway, welcome aboard. I think Keith might be having some there he is. Okay, there he is.
Okay, we good?
Welcome aboard, everybody. Tonight, going to have a fun video tonight. We're going to be doing this in place of the stream team live chat tonight. Brian and Greg are both out of the hive, so to speak. Greg has an obligation he's tending to tonight, and Brian just has a lot of things going on. And so we decided to do something with just myself, and then I talked to Keith, and here we are, Keith Spillman from Half Tracks and Honeybees. And I'm sure everyone on here probably knows Keith, but just in case there's some folks on here who are not familiar with Keith, tell us a little bit about yourself. Can you hear me, Keith? There you go.
Yeah, hopefully we're not breaking up too bad. Does that sound pretty good?
I've got you now. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Keith Spillman. I'm in the eastern foothills of North Carolina. Been keeping bees for, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years. But probably only had a clue what I was doing the past 5 or 6 years. Early on, I would buy bees and they would die, and I'd buy bees and they would die. And once I got that first hive through the winter, that's when it started building up for me. You go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 9, 17, and here we go. So it's good to be on here today. I appreciate you inviting me, Bruce. I enjoy doing these things.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We have a blast with it every Wednesday night with the stream team, and I just look forward to it. It's kind of, we were talking before we got on tonight about how amazing it is. You know, the stream team started in December, a little over 3 years ago, whenever that was. What was that, 22, 20? Anyway, whatever that was. And it's just been rolling. We've had it rolling ever since then, pretty much every week. We probably haven't missed 10 weeks in 3 years, I don't imagine. That kind of includes even like the night before Thanksgiving and Christmas. Sometimes we're on here if we can be, and so it's been a lot of fun. But through this experience, we've been able to meet a lot of people like you, Keith, and so many people here in the chat. And it always amazes me that when I look in the chat, I see a lot of people that have been here, many from the very start. And also I see some names I don't recognize every week. And so it's just cool to see so many folks in here and to be able to recognize. Obviously, we can't recognize everyone, but I do see a lot of names in here. And please forgive me, guys, if everyone out there in the chat, if I don't, if we don't address every comment, or if I miss something or whatever. Brian Coper is the master at just seeing what's going on in the chat. He can be typing, reading comments, thumb controls, and send us a private message all at the same time. I'm lucky to be able to even think about what to say. And so if we don't get all the comments or questions answered, if we don't keep up, just try to put your question again if you have a question for Keith or me. What we're going to do, I think tonight we got a pretty cool topic. I mean, obviously this is just Keith and I were talking before we got on about what a fun time of year it is this time of year with, I think from north to south, east to west, people are in their bees now. Down here in the south, we're a little ahead of where some folks are in the north, but then we're about to have to start dealing with problems, pests and things like that, and just trying to keep bees alive and robbing way sooner than so many people up north are. And so everybody's got their own set of problems at different times of the year. And so that's one of the cool things about beekeeping is the challenge of being able to figure out, what's best for your bees in your area with your particular style and what your goals are. So that's pretty cool. But Keith, tell us kind of what's been going on up at your operation up there, kind of how many colonies you have and what you've been doing. Anyone who follows Keith's channel, and by the way, his channel is, well, tell them what your channel's name is, Keith, so they can look you up, and how to find you. And then tell us kind of what type of operation you have and what you've been up to up there in North Carolina.
Okay, the channel's name is Half Tracks and Honeybees. And a lot of folks wonder what a half track is. Well, that's an old World War II military vehicle. I restore old military hardware and play with honeybees. So that Half Tracks and Honeybees name just popped in my head one day, and it seemed like it was kind of cool. So that's what we went with. But yeah, I came through winter with 22 hives. I went into winter with 25. A couple of really small late season swarms, I call it, in little 5-frame nukes. I lost them, and one big hive went queenless, so I just combined them back with another hive. So I came through with 22 out of 25. Right now, I'm at about 35. So I've had a few splits, and I've caught a few swarms. And if anybody that follows my channel knows that I don't like to do splits. I try to keep my hives as big as I can because a big hive makes a lot of honey. And I only split them when I go into them and find capped swarm cells. And I've had to do that a couple, 3 times this season. But I've been very successful in just keeping them really big without them swarming. So I do a lot of things to keep the swarming down. I'm checking them about every 4 to 5 days when it starts getting into mid-March, and I do a lot of things like split the brood, which Greg Roberts is one that talks about that on one of the Bob Benny videos. I do it a little bit more aggressive than he did. He said when you have 4 frames of brood, pull the 2 and 2 apart and put a frame of drawn comb down between it, and you just keep doing that over and over. I'll actually take if I've got a hive that's got a lot of brood in it, I'll pull every 2 frames apart and stick a drawn comb between them, and I'll keep doing that until the super gets full, or until the brood box gets full of brood, and then I'll add another box. Now, one thing for folks that don't follow my channel, I use all medium boxes. I don't use any deeps. So the way I go about things is a little bit different. But I put my super zone back in March the 12th, something like that. I put my super zone very early. I found out that there's a lot of honey made in this area early in the year. They put their super zone too late. I think the super moths early, and so you don't have to worry about them protecting that empty space. So I me, but you know, some of the stuff that I do, I mean, nodding. I'm obviously blessed with a really great place to put the maples, the dead. Really comes on strong around here, and my first honey pull was the first honey. I've pulled 3 times this year. I'll probably pull at least one more time. I'm kind of waiting right now because the flow has gone downhill quite a bit, but it's been a really good year. We've made as much this year as we made all of last year, so we're gonna beat our number from last year. But like I said, the keys for me are where I'm at, big hives, and get them supers on early, and I roll through them pretty quick too. I don't want the bees to fill all the supers up and then I pull them off, because then I've got nowhere for all those bees to go. I like to pull the supers a couple at a time off the hives. I might have 3 or 4 supers on a hive, but I don't want to pull 4 supers off and push 4 supers full of bees down into 3 medium boxes. I don't think that's a good plan, and I don't do that. So that's why I pull so many times. I pull, I won't say a little bit at a time, but I'll pull honey as I need to make sure the ladies have room to put more honey. So I guess that's kind of hopefully I didn't ramble too bad, but that's kind of how I go about doing what I do. I'd be glad to answer any questions if anybody's got it.
Yeah, that's great. We have we got let's see, over 100 people in here now, right at 100 plus a little bit. People are just kind of starting to roll in a little bit. But so if anyone has any questions for Keith or for me, or just general beekeeping questions, we're kind of focusing on honey tonight. But really, the name of the chat is let's talk bees and honey. So really that kind of opens it up for everything, but honey's kind of the emphasis tonight because I know a lot of people are in the process of starting to super up in the northern parts of the country where, they're just still probably catching swarms and everything right now in swarm season. We're probably pretty close to done with that here. We used to have a few swarms here or there really throughout the season, but when the bees start packing the honey in here, it seems like the swarming tendencies tends to go down a little bit. They don't tend to swarm as much as they do, like say maybe a month or two ago here in Alabama. But we probably have a similar season. It's weird because you would think we would be ahead of you. Down here, we have really the first of the year, like in January, really right at about New Year's. I think the red maples are starting to bloom. And so it's kind of a trickle type flow. It's not a heavy flow, but it's enough to get the bees stimulated and they will just start to take off. And we have a couple of patches in there where we have a little dearth. Like they'll build up. You'll see them bringing in pollen. You'll see them bringing in a little bit of nectar here or there. They're not filling up the supers, but they're bringing a little bit in here or there. But what you really see is a lot of bees starting to, the brood really starts to just explode. And you can have a deep and a medium or a double deep just packed out with bees like in mid-January. And then all of a sudden it'll get cold or we'll just, whatever that flow coming in is, it'll just stop. And that's our most dangerous time of the year is probably, really in the wintertime, late winter, like late February, March, and even in the first part of April. Some years it's really the bees can starve. And it's like, it seems like we'll have, and I'm not even sure what's blooming out there. We'll have something come in like in January and then we'll have a little dearth, maybe because it's cold or maybe it just quits blooming. Then we'll have another week or two of something trickling in, and then it'll have another little mini dearth, So it's kind of like, and it seems like the bees are just utilizing whatever nectar and pollen is coming in to grow and make baby bees. I guess they feel like it's strong enough to begin to grow like crazy, but they're prepping for that honey flow. But we don't get a really significant honey flow until the privet type season starts to, and that's usually in April, early to mid-April. That privet will start to bloom, and different things, blackberries. Privet, there's clover starting to bloom around that time here in Alabama. And then in the fields around here, we have, I call it wild mustard, but we also have, some people call it wild radish. I think it's the same thing. Oops, I didn't mean to, star that. Let's see. I'm trying to star. Once again, if I mess up on this, guys, it's because I'm not the tech guy. Brian Coper usually is, but So it really kicks in this year. Our spring flow kicked in probably in mid-April. They started bringing in. I thought, man, we're late. We're not going to get any honey. Then all of a sudden they were packing the boxes out. I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to have a record spring crop. And then, so I got my supers. If you watch my channel, I didn't do a ton of videos on my process, but what I do is we typically harvest on Mother's Day or the week after Mother's Day here. That's a good time to get that spring honey off. It's right kind of a little mini, they stop for a little while. And so late April, early May, I just started moving I went through all my colonies, my production colonies. I started moving all the honey that was ready up to the top, and I put a check mark on the box so I knew which ones I needed to take. Moved them up to the top. Some had one, some had two, and all of them didn't have enough. All of them weren't ready to take any honey, but a lot of them were. And I thought, man, this is awesome. This honey flow is going to be great, and it was for a while. And then about a week before, if anyone watched my simple comb video, that was right at the end of, we were still had a little flow coming in, or maybe it was right at the end of that spring flow, whenever that about 3 or 4 weeks ago when I put that stuff on. And it's just like somebody turned the switch off, like no honey for like 2 to 3 weeks. Just, it was dry and nothing was coming in. The bees were kind of rowdy. They were a little chippy. They were a little upset. And not bad. My bees are a lot nicer now, but they just weren't really having anything to do. They weren't flying like crazy or anything. And I'm like, oh no. So that honey flow, we ended up harvesting this past weekend, and we ended up having, I pulled 64 boxes, 34 5-gallon buckets of honey, and that was our spring flow. And I'm still like down here, tallow is our biggest crop, and the trees were blooming. They're just late. They were just late. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, we're not going to get any summer honey. And I got a lot of customers. I was stressing about it, worried about it. And then Saturday, when I went to start putting after we got done extracting, I went to put a few boxes on hives down in Slocum and Appling Farms. In Slocum, the bees were just like within that 2 day period that the tallow switched on, and you could smell that honey smell in the bee yard. You know what I'm talking about? When you walk into a bee yard, you smell that honey coming in. I'm sure each nectar smells a little bit different, but it's that distinct smell of that honey coming in, and the bees were just shooting vertically through those trees, and just they were at it. So the tallow has started to bloom, and just yesterday I was down at Applin Farms, and I did a little reel on my Facebook, Instagram, and the box is five boxes high, 2 deeps and 3 mediums. 2 of those boxes, if I'm not mistaken, I put on there after we harvested Saturday after we extracted, and I cracked the lid, and the top box is full of nectar already after 3 days. And it wasn't capped, and all the cells weren't full, but it had a lot of nectar in there, and so they are packing in. I think there's some tallow, little stand of tallow trees out there close to Alpine Farms, because you can see the hives are lined up in a straight line. I've got the pallets lined up. There's like 45 colonies there. And looking at it from the end, if you watch my videos, on one side, there's like a little series of ponds right there. On the other side, it's just like a field. And when I first pulled up yesterday afternoon, I noticed a cloud of bees coming out of the hives. When you got 45 colonies, there's bees everywhere. But when I looked at them closer, there were no bees going towards the pond side. But when you look the other direction towards the field over there in those woods, it was like a daggum super highway of bees just shooting across there as fast as they could fly and coming back, just back and forth, back and forth. That's the coolest thing, man, when they're busy like that and they're happy. And so I'm hoping we'll have a good flow. But my technique is a little different. I do start stacking them on when I start seeing nectar come in. What I do usually is I put a box, my supers of comb on. I start putting them on there without an excluder and let the bees get there and start working in there. Now, that risk of that is you do have the queen start to lay up there a little bit sometimes. But then, a few weeks before I anticipate harvesting, once the bees get working up there, I shake the bees out of that super. I put a queen excluder down, then put the super back on. If there's any eggs or brood, it emerges, within a time frame before I harvest, and they'll backfill it with honey. And that's worked for me. The frames aren't maybe as clean. Like there is some brood. There's some brood in there occasionally, but it works well. And then I also make sure I put an upper entrance of some sort, either a stick in the corner of the lid, or I slide. If I'll put a excluder, a super, and then I'll slide the next box forward just a little bit. Maybe if there's a 1/4 inch space in the back, the bees can get in and out, and they love that. And it seems to me like that really helps to make sure the bees will go up through that excluder and produce honey. So it's worked for me for the years. And then I kind of watch them, and in a sense, kind of like what you do, I stack the supers up as the bees kind of need it. And then right now, I don't have a lot of bee work to do right now, honestly, because the bees are, they're just busy doing their thing, and they've got the supers are stacked up. Every single honey super I've got with drawn comb is on a hive right now. So what else can I do? And we won't harvest again probably till June. As much as I have, and with my work schedule, I would love to be able to do it by degree, kind of like what you do, like take off, like consistently every week or two, take some honey off. But we just have to just go crazy for a couple of days, go gangbusters and get it all done. And it's a couple of really long, tough, hard days, but then it's done, and then it's in the buckets, and we can worry about trying to get rid of it, like you said, then trying to sell it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Beekeepers, they need to do what works for them.
That's right.
Our season seems to hit a lot harder than it does for you folks. I know Mike Berry talked about that a little bit in one of his videos about how he has to work with his bees for so many weeks before any kind of flow or anything starts. So he's working in his bees. Gosh, I guess he's starting back in mid-January, mid-February, something like that. Ours, once I put the supers on in early March, man, it's bang, bang, bang. It's right. You're in the middle of it, and you got to go. So now you did mention one thing there I wanted to talk about a little bit. One thing that I don't do during the honey flow is any kind of in-depth inspection in the hive. I'm in them every 4 to 5 days up to that point. But once I put the supers on and once the flow starts, I'm really not down in the brood area of my hives. Gosh, I might go into a middle of next month, something like that. you know, we've worked hard up to that point to make sure they've got everything they need to make honey. You know, the queens look good, the lay-in's good, they got plenty of room, everything's ready to roll. And then you turn them loose for the race. And I think you kind of alluded to, you do the same thing. You're not down in your brood area during the flow.
Not much, man. I actually just, once I start stacking honey supers once the queen excluder goes on, I mean, if I have someone that just wants to come and see bees, I'll go in a few colonies, go down
Yeah.
deeper. If I pull a lid off, or if I look at the front of the hive and I detect there's a problem, like I think the hive is either getting robbed out or dying out, or just there's
Mm.
not enough bees, then I'll go down and inspect. But if pick up the lid and they look like they're doing well, I'll just close that lid back up. And so the disadvantage to that is, I think sometimes at the end of the honey season, sometimes you go down there and you find things that you'd rather not find. Maybe some issues with just honey bound situations, or maybe some dead, just some bees that are not healthy or dead outs or some things like that. And so, but I just can't. I can't go down on a deep dive. Some of these hives have 3, 4 boxes on them, sometimes even 5.
Yeah.
And there's just no way with my schedule I can go down and inspect every colony. I don't know that's a good idea to do that as often. Once you got them set up and they're doing their thing, man, just let them rock and roll. And I do know every year I do lose some. I'm sure I have some that swarm on me after I've stacked the honey supers on. I think over the years I've actually had quite a few that have requeened themselves with maybe a swarm or a supersedure during that time that I'm not in there, and that's okay as long as I have a healthy, viable queen. That's what matters to me. I do try to. I've started trying to get my queens marked as much as possible. I don't always get them all marked. I just can't go through every single colony and find every single queen. But up until I start making splits or getting new queens that I know are from the new year, I will mark everything I find. Like, for example, now, any new queen I find that's not marked, I'll mark with a blue mark. And it may have been last year's queen that I never saw, but at least I know it was at least this year. Does that make sense? So next spring and next year, if I see a queen that's got a blue mark, I know that she was in the hive this year in 2025. And that kind of helps me keep track of, an age. And one of my goals is to keep my average queen age down a little bit lower. I feel like that helps keep them from swarming as much and helps the bees. It seems like to me that colonies that have younger queens typically are just more healthy, especially now. It takes them a while to get established sometimes. So maybe if it's a queen from, April, it's May and June right now, maybe it takes them a while to get going. I've noticed sometimes if you're patient, these queens sometimes will click it on and they'll just, by next spring, they'll be going incredible. It may take them this summer to really get rolling. But I've had some queens, for example, I had a few from Corey Stevens, and they would be in like a nuke box, and I'd be like, man, they're not going to do anything. And overwinter them in a nuke box, I'm like, man, they're just not going to grow. And then, boy, when that next spring hits, they just explode up into these big production colonies. And I don't know I guess I've got a couple of his left, but I've noticed that with some genetics and some bees, is it takes them a year to get going throughout that season by the next season. So to me, and you may or may not agree with this, Keith, but to me, it seems like the next spring from when that queen is new is when that's kind of their prime in my opinion. Would you agree with that? Is that what you've seen, or what do you think?
Yeah, well, you hit on a couple of things there. I saw a couple of questions. Dodd House asked how often that I requeened, and Russell K. Koopman, he asked about if I have mostly Italians. Well, then
Okay.
I'm
Let's
kind of
questions. I didn't catch those questions. I'm sorry, folks, if I don't catch them. But
yeah.
put them
Well,
in all caps if you can, so I can see them. And sometimes I'll still miss them. But go ahead.
Yeah, that dovetailed nicely with what you just asked. I have to say that I never requeen. I'm a walk away split kind of guy. I've never killed a queen on purpose. I've always let the hives requeen as they see fit. As far as Italians, I just call them my Shacktown mutts. Since I've never bought any queens, they're just whatever they are. I've got light bees, I've got dark bees. I'm sure I've got a little bit of everything. So, but that seems to work well for me. The walkaway splits I do, gosh, I'm probably in the 90% or better as far as how successful I am with my walkaways. I rarely have that fail. I think I set them up nicely, just like you would when you're trying to raise queens, as far as lots of bees, lots of food, good nutrition, let them make a queen. So, so yeah, I think I might be an outlier on how I manage my queens, but once again, it works for me. So I'm not really planning on changing it.
Well, I did a lot of that too, and I do think, there's a I don't even really know the guy, but there was a guy here, and I'm not even sure if he still has bees. But when I was getting started, he was a guy kind of south of town here, and when you drove down this certain road, you kind of see him off in the trees down there, a few hives, and I think that his management strategy was he just let them swarm every year, just kind of kept them in deep in the medium and double deep, whatever he kept them in. I can't remember exactly how he kept them, but um, and he would let them swarm and just requeen themselves, and they would just kind of continue that cycle. And bees are designed to do that. I mean, that's what they do in nature. So there's nothing wrong with that. Even watching Bob Benny's videos, they mark everything, and so if they're going through their colonies and they see a queen that's not marked, they just, if it's a swarm cell, if it's a super procedure, if it's an emergency, they just go ahead and roll with that queen. They don't replace them if they're new queens or young queens. And I've noticed he does that. If I'm not mistaken, when I've watched his videos, they're if it's a healthy, viable queen that's doing a good job, they just leave her in there. They don't go in there and try to pinch everything. And so there are different styles. My bees are known to have a fairly spicy attitude, or historically they have been quite. These Southeast Alabama bees around here, the feral bees that I've caught a lot of in swarms and so forth, have been, some are nice, good bees. A lot of them are really strong and vibrant and healthy bees, but a lot of them are fairly mite resistant. But man, they'll just staple your ankles, your socks to your ankles. And it's just, I've just gotten to where I used to think it was kind of cool and fun, and I was tough for doing that, and it was the thing to do. But now, the more that I'm in by bees, it's just so much fun, more fun to me to work just calm, gentle bees that'll roll over when you talk to them and let you scratch their belly. Those real nice bees, and so we got a lot of questions rolling in, guys. I'm marking these questions, so we'll get to them as we can a little bit later in the chat. But so I've actually, if anyone's watched my channel, you'll know I've actively tried to replace a lot of those genetics, especially the meaner ones, by attrition in some cases just through splits. I've been ordering queens. I've got a guy in Hawaii, and I wouldn't mind trying some people here in the U.S. as well, here in the stateside, here in the continental United States, here more locally, but just trying to get some more gentle genetics. I've been super pleased with his queens, and they are Italian, primarily Italian Cordovan type queens. They're beautiful, and they build up like crazy, and they just make honey. And now they are not mite resistant to speak of. You do have to treat, but man, they just do. I just love them. And so my bees are much less feisty now. I do still have a few. We talked about it last week. If I catch swarms, I still catch a swarm occasionally if it's real easy for me. If someone calls me, they're right here close by, or if I find one in my bee yard. But the ones I catch that I don't know where they came from, like if someone calls me here a mile or so away and they have a swarm hanging in a tree, I've got a yard now. It does have some production hives there too, but where I'm taking all my swarms now and kind of watching them to see how they do. And if they get too feisty or nasty, I can of course replace the queen then. I'm also working on trying to raise some of my own queens. I just have grafted a few days ago. I've got some that I'm going to try to get out in some mating nukes this week. And I know there's some folks that like to see everything I do, and I try to show as much as I can, but this is an experiment. I'm not showing everything I'm doing. I just don't have time. And I did have a pretty good take. I think there's probably 21 or 22 out of 30. And yesterday I used the easy peasy queens to set little cages on them. So I'm going to go out this weekend and try and get those in colonies and see how they do. But I did graft off of one of my Hawaiian queens. Pretty sure it was. It's doing really well. So we'll see how they turn out. I'm just going to drop those little two-frame mating or two-frame nukes. I've got two-frame nuke boxes. They're not far from Athens Farms, where all my favorite bee yard, and just see how they do get mated and so forth. And so when it comes to queens, I've become much more intentional with trying to adjust my genetics. But for many years, I did much of what you do. I bring a few queens in here or there, but mostly it was local stock. And if you Mr. Ed kind of does that. He just kind of makes the walkaway splits, and he has a really nice operation going on. And, that's what bees do in nature. So there's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, I think if you got good, strong bees, if you're happy with them, then why wouldn't you do that? You know, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the I've got are very gentle, very laid back, easy to work.
Yeah, those are the ideal ones.
It's on it, and I said, tell her every time I open them up, they try to kill me, but they're going to make about 200 pounds of honey this year, so I can forgive them a little bit. I just have to, yeah, I just have to take it as a challenge.
Oh yeah.
If I jostle them just the least little bit, or if I do anything, they just roar out of the hive. And I don't normally, when I'm working supers, I don't use a smoker, so I just try to work real gentle and wear gloves. But man, that hive, I almost have to use a little bit of smoke, or they're just all over me. But I can take a little bit of that for 200 pounds of honey. I can put up with them. So
yeah, I've heard the term, and there are probably people in the comments here that believe this, or have maybe seen in their own operation, that mean bees are the most productive bees. And there may be some truth to that. I've had some really kind of nasty colonies that made a lot of honey, but I've also had a lot of really nice colonies that make a lot of honey. So
yeah,
you know, if I have to give up a super of honey for the attitude, you know, I'll just make another nice colony. But I do have some that are still spicy. It's okay. And I totally get it. And I worked bees like that. And I thought it was kind of fun for a while, but now maybe I'm just getting older. It's not fun anymore. There's just a different vibe. And when I'm working bees and they're calm.
Yeah.
But even on the rainy days, even if there's not a flow, even the nice bees will get after you some on the day. There are certain days they just really don't want to be messed with. And so, you know, you just have to just deal with it sometimes. They're just how they are. Yeah, DC says here, not mean but sassy. Yeah, I tend to agree. And you know, it's funny because there are some semantics, some terms that people use that other people get upset by. And I'm not saying that's the case here, but you know, I used to say mean bees, and people would say they're not mean, they're just defensive, you know, things like that. Or people, you know, you say I've got a hive of bees, and they're like, no, it's not a hive, it's a colony. And I'm just like, I get it. I mean, I know that, but anyway, but I like the sassy term. I like to say spicy, but sassy may be even better.
Yeah.
Maybe spicy is a level above sassy. I don't know. Or maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure. But
yeah. You had some great videos dealing with some of your spicy hives.
So, yeah, and I just, you know, and one way and here's a little trick. I learned this from Bob Benny actually, and it really does work. If you've got a colony that's just stapling your ankles, man, stapling your socks to your ankles, if you just pick that thing up and move it across the bee yard and just set them down, the mean bees are the foragers, the ones that are on the outside of the hive. And so if you set it over there and you can take it even a few yards away, the bees it'll be much less difficult to work that colony of bees, because the foragers are out there flying around. They may go back to the original spot, or they may incorporate into in their colony, and it just tends to be much easier until the next generation of bees rolls through. Another way to do it is just to break them down and split them like crazy. You can actually take the original hive over and set it across the bee yard, and then just make a bunch of splits, and you know, and then it'll humble them. And when they're smaller, to me, it seems like they're less spicy as well, even if it is a fairly spicy colony. But anyway, that we could talk about that kind of thing all that long. But let's just see if I think there's a couple of questions. And if we miss, I've got 7 questions that I've started here. If anyone asks a question and we missed it, by the time we go through these 7 questions, just please put your questions in all caps. It's so much easier to see them in all caps when this regular small normal typing. It's just hard to see sometimes, and we may miss the questions. But let me see if we can kind of roll through these. Sam Mixon up there, I think he's in South Carolina. Mr. Sam says, hello, Mr. Keith. How much honey did you make this spring? Are you going to do any videos on your bees? Going to do full inspections of one of your hives of bees. So he wants to know how much did you make, and are you going to do some full inspection videos coming up soon?
Yeah, right now I'm at about 1,400 pounds, about 115 gallons. I made 120 last year, so I'm going to eclipse that this year. There's there's several gallons on the hives right now that I might pull in the next week or so. But we'll definitely make some videos when we go back into the hives for the first time doing inspections. Because like Bruce said, sometimes you find some surprises you weren't expecting. Um, People are surprised sometimes at the amount of honey that a hive will make when it don't have a queen. I've had some hives make a lot of honey when they didn't have a queen. I guess all the nurse bees turn into foragers. There's no brood to look after, and you just got you've got a big workforce. And you think it's a strong hive, and you go in, and there's not a bit of brood in it. So that's why you have your little resource nukes sitting around. So when you find these hives that are queenless, you've got spare parts. So I'm big on having resource hives around the bee yard just for that reason.
For
So yeah,
resources.
for resources, spare parts.
Yeah, as far as what I'm doing, Sam, I'm kind of in the same boat as Keith right now. I am doing some stuff, some bee work, but mostly we're just managing honey. I'm also kind of messing around with my queens a little bit, just trying to figure that out a little bit, get that ironed in a little bit. We'll be doing some videos here or there, but not a lot of deep inspections probably. But for the next few weeks, actually just going to let them rock and roll until we pull again. And then we'll start getting into the kind of miserable parts of beekeeping. It's just trying to keep them alive through summer and then on into winter. So after about, late June, early July here, it's all about survival till the next April, honestly. And so that's kind of where we're at now. And so that's kind of what we're doing down here in Alabama, Sam. Appreciate the question, man. Let's move on to the next one here. All right, we got a question here from Bees in the Abyss. Keith or Bruce, how important is it to face a hive south? What do you think, Keith? Face it kind of south or southeast. You know how they say you should face it south or southeast?
I've got mine facing every which way.
Yeah, if you read the books, they tell you to do that.
Yeah, I've got some facing. So
yeah, I've got them. Go ahead.
Shade versus sun.
Yeah.
The hives that are in the sun are definitely going to out in the shade. I've kind of got two shifts, I call it. I've got my morning and from late in the day. So depending on where they're at in the bee yard. But I've never seen that much difference on which way I pointed the hives. So I'm not a good one to bless that one.
Yeah, let me trying to get some marked here. I'm having a hard time keeping up with the questions we're asking and the questions that are in the comments because I can't see both at the same time. So once again, apologies if I missed somebody's question. That's a great question, Bees in the Abyss. I have mine on pallets facing all different directions. And I do think, I kind of like maybe a little bit of partial shade. I mean, kind of like you were mentioning, Keith, you got some in different situations. But my bees out in the open, it seems like more in the open grassy type areas, like at Appleton Farms, they're in full sun. It's kind of grassy right there. It's on that farm right there. There's water right next to them. And I don't have a lot of hive beetle problems there. Some people say, and I have seen hive beetles take over colonies in the sun. So it's not like if you're in the sun, it just takes care of the hive beetle problem. But I think hive beetles sometimes is as much the soil that's there, the sandy, the type of soil, and the of us underneath the hive as much as it is being exposed to the sun. But I think facing the south or southeast, maybe the idea behind that is there's a couple of reasons in my mind that you might want to do that. Number one, if you face the sun, I guess theoretically they get out working earlier in the morning, and southwest is kind of the direction of the sun this time of year is kind of in that southwest, kind of goes through the sky in that direction. I know the southwest part of my house is just hammered all summer long, and so I think that's one theory behind it. Number two, if the hives are facing south and you're in a cold climate, that north wind obviously won't be blowing right in the front of that colony, and if in whatever entrance you have. Those are the only two reasons I can think of. But other than that, the bees don't really care. I don't think it matters. I imagine you find bee holes in trees, bee trees facing every direction, sides of houses facing every direction. I do know that in nature, at least in my experience, you find bees more in the edge of the woods, in trees, kind of on the edge of the woods. I don't think you see them that often down deep in the woods. You do probably sometimes. I don't think you're going to find them very often sitting out in the middle of the field in a any type of whatever. Usually they're in an area that gets a little bit of shade. It's not super hot. I also know that I don't do removals, but I've been on a couple of removal excursions with friends. That one guy in particular, where the bees moved into, it's kind of in the southwest or the south part of a house, and it was just so hot the bees weren't very healthy, and I'm sure they would have died out had we not gotten them out of there. And
Yep.
so a couple things to think about. But yeah, it doesn't matter. I don't think really all that much at all which direction the beehives are facing. Some might
Yep.
agree. That's just kind of my opinion on it. Oh, let me see if I can get any more questions here. Appreciate everyone being on here tonight and all the activity going on in the comments amongst you guys, all of y'all. That's one thing that's so fun about this community, about these live chats, is people can just kind of discuss things amongst the chat and answer a lot of questions, throughout the country, throughout the world, even while we're talking about either that or something else completely. All right, let's see. Let's try another comment or question here. Uncle 60 says, I'm getting 2 late nukes in 7 to 8 days from today in New Jersey. Any advice? I plan on feeding them on day 1 until they get organized from the move. They're coming from South Jersey to Central New Jersey. Any thoughts on that, Keith, as far as feeding the nukes, getting them kind of how long would you feed them, and kind of how would you handle a new nuke that you just brought into your operation?
Excuse me. I'd be curious. I'm assuming that's a probably a 5-frame nuke, and is he going to put that over into a 10-frame box or an 8-frame box? What are we going to do with our nuke? If I was going to put it into a 10-frame, I would definitely give them a little extra food. I wouldn't give them too much space to start with. Bees seem to kind of like to be confined, or at least I see it that way. That's why I like little 5-frame nukes so much. 2 or 3 story 5-frame nukes. They grow amazingly quick. But yeah, and it's according to how much feed comes with the nuke. If they come with a big old fat frame of honey with some pollen and all, they might not need as much food as a nuke that just comes with a couple of frames of brood, a half a frame of honey, and maybe a couple of frames of foundation or something. Your nukes can vary so much the way they're sold. You really just have to go with the cards that you're dealt, and if they need food, you need to give them some food.
That's a great answer. Really, you have to kind of assess that nuke and see what state they're in to know what to do. If it's really not a very strong nuke, and I do know sometimes if they're traveling a distance, they won't make them quite as strong because they can overheat and travel. And so you got to look and see how much brood's in there, how much food's in there, and then and adapt accordingly. Also depends on what the flow is in your area. If you got a good honey flow coming in, they might be fine once they get, like you said, Uncle 60, you said that, you're just going to let them get kind of settled in, get them established for a day or two. I think that's a great idea. Just feed them, let them get used to their spot, maybe give them a little bit of a jump start. And then if there's a good flow going on, you really don't have to feed them anymore. Of course, if you put them in a bigger box, 8 or 10 frame box, and you only got 4 or 5 frames of bees there, if you feed them, it may help stimulate them to draw out comb. If you don't have comb to put in there, it'll help stimulate that. Keith, on this same question, let me pick your brain a little bit. You're dropping a nuke in a say in South Carolina where you're at, or I guess New Jersey's a little bit north. I think we're probably past the danger stage right now with temperatures, although I have heard it's pretty cold in some spots still. You're going to drop that nuke in a 10 frame box. Let's just say that. Say it's a deep one, even though I know you run mediums, or say it's a medium nuke, whatever it is. How would you set up that 10 frame box? Would you drop the nuke in the middle and put all foundation on the outside? Would you stagger them? Would you checkerboard them? Would you adjust the frames around it all? Or how would you say it's a good strong nuke, 2 or 3 frames of brood, and then 2 frames of food, pollen, and equals with pollen and honey in them? How would you arrange that box?
Yeah, normally if I'm going to put them in a 10 frame and put the
A little bit of technical difficulties. Hey Keith, can you hear me? Had a little bit of a technical difficulty there. Let's see if I can get up with him.
Are we back?
Now we are.
Okay.
I didn't hear what you said about your 10 frame. How would you do it? Start over on that. Kind of lost you there for a minute.
I think Greg's down here messing with my internet connection. If I was going to drop them in a 10 frame box, I would put it right in the middle. If I had some drawn comb, I would put that to the outside, or maybe put it between the food and one of the frames of brood. But I wouldn't split the nuke up a whole lot in a 10 frame 1-story box. Now, if I was putting them over into in a 5 frame nuke, I might split them between 2 boxes, an upper and a lower box, but still keep the brood right over, up and down, where the nurses can tend to it easy. But
I've tried both. And now early, if it's cold, if you're worried about the weather and there's any stress going to be on those bees, then I would say absolutely drop the nuke. I would just drop it right in the middle, man. I might move a frame of foundation inside the food frames, 1 frame maybe, but I'd probably just leave it all together, and just let them kind of get established to start working from the inside out. However, what I've done before, I've actually done like experiments where I did both. Like I would do some, drop the nuke, the 5 frames in the middle. I've done some where I checkerboard it, starting on one side, outside frame, food frame, then a frame of foundation, then the next frame of foundation, all the way across, which sounds absolutely crazy. But when you do it during a good flow, like this time of the year for me, when you do it during a good flow, or when it's, you got to make sure it's warm enough so they can protect it, those bees will draw that foundation out like it seems like overnight. It's crazy how fast they'll do that. And I'm not recommending anybody do that. I'm gonna pull a Mike Berry here and say this is a how I do, not a how to do, because a lot of people would absolutely just absolutely trash me for even saying that. But I have found that in a good flow, or if you're feeding them appropriately, and if it's warm, they can draw that comb out so fast, because bees hate there to be empty space. They don't like that at all. So if you got good, heavily waxed foundation, you drop it in there, they'll draw it out really fast, at least in my experience. Another thing I do, if I've got, a good strong, if I put it right in the middle, if I have a good strong nucleus of bees right in the middle, whether it's a split I made in a 10 frame box or whatever it is, if most of the brood is in the middle and they draw out maybe the next 2 frames on each side. So you maybe have, you'll have that frame on each, the next to outside frame on each side will be like halfway drawn out. And the outside frames, they're just barely not even touching hardly. So what I'll do then is I might rotate that outside frame in 1 frame, and kind of rotate it back towards the middle. Leave the center. You can leave the center brood nest where it is, but start rotating those outside frames in and not in 1 or 2, and then they'll tend to draw it out faster. As you get closer to that brood, they want to have everything connected and drawn out in the middle. So that's kind of a dangerous thing to do if it's cold or if you're not real comfortable, if you're just kind of new at it. But that is something I've tried with good success. And I've actually compared them, and they'll almost draw the checkerboarded one out faster initially in the same circumstance if the conditions are right. So it's a risky thing to do if you're not real comfortable with it, but it can work if you just want to try something. So anyway. Just a thought, but I would tell people probably as new beekeepers, you should probably just drop it in the middle. Would probably be the best thing to do. Then also, Keith, one thing I do, and say that colony has moved out, however you put it in there, now it's just jam packed. You buy a good strong nuke. It's got say 3 frames of brood, 2 frames of food. There's good flow going, and within a couple of weeks, they've drawn that bottom box out like 80%. You add that second box. What would you do, whether it's a medium or a deep box? How do you get those bees to start working that new foundation above? Any strategies you use to help them draw that second box out faster?
Yeah, in that case, I always like to pull some up into that second brood box. maybe at least pull up one frame of brood, one frame of food. It's just according to what you got to work with down in that bottom box. You know, best case would be a food on each side of a brood or a couple of broods. So
Yeah,
and
that it really helps to get bees up there. You
oh
know,
yeah,
and to give them something to do, especially if you pull a frame of brood up there, then they have to tend it. You know, they're not going to leave it.
yep,
And once they do that, it's almost like the frames next door, like magnets. They start having to draw that out, and before you know it, they'll draw it out. And so I'm going to
yep.
go into down my rabbit hole again. And I actually recently have done this to several colonies. I've tried both. Once again, I've tried pulling the one or two frames up, and then I've also just taken the second deep box. I use deeps. I'm sure you can do it with mediums as well. And this sounds, once again, it's kind of counterintuitive, but I will take, it's just, and I've tried it and it worked extremely well during a good flow. I just will take I'll get my second box, like it'll have 10 empty frames in it if it's all foundation. I'll take 5 frames out of that box, and I'll just take the outside frame from the bottom box and put it in that new box and just kind of stagger checkerboard them in again. And so I'll have 2 boxes that are checkerboarded. And man, it's incredible how fast they draw that out in a good flow. They won't do very well if there's not a good flow coming, if they don't have food. But man, if they got the resources, that's the key, is the resources, man. A good strong colony of bees with good resources, and they could do amazing things. But once again, if you're at all concerned about it, then I think the method where you just pull a frame or two up is perfect, and they will end up drawing it out pretty quickly that way too. But I just find sometimes when you do it that way, they just don't get all the way to the outside as quickly. Do you find that as well? But you can always rotate those frames into the middle again, like we talked about earlier.
Oh yeah, the middle. A lot of times those outside frames get wasted.
Yeah.
Even a strong hive.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they'll, even if it is strong and they're all drawing comb, if the hive begins to contract, they go more towards the center. That's just kind of what they do. They'll put the food above and around the edges, and the bees themselves will move towards the center. It's like a dome in there, and that's just naturally what they do. So that is true. While we're talking about drawn out frames, let me ask this question. Cayman just did a video on this, Cayman Reynolds, and I thought his method that he uses was genius. And I've done kind of a variation of that, I guess, maybe, but not really. But I'll talk about that in a minute. But tell me, Keith, when you're putting if you have new foundation you want to get drawn out in your honey supers, how do you do that in the most efficient way, in your opinion?
Well,
Getting a little bit of a lag again.
Sugar syrup, some really thin. Yeah,
Okay, start
yeah.
over with that.
I seem to be doing that at a regular.
We had a little bit of a lag. Can you start over with that? With how you draw them
out? In the spring, I used to feed a lot of sugar syrup and draw out comb, and that worked for me really good. But then my bees all went crazy and got swarmy on me, and I quit doing that. But and I haven't had to try to draw a lot out during the flow. But I saw Cayman's video, and that was interesting. I've never really heard of that technique before. Have you? That was kind of new to me. I'm interested in trying that.
Well, I've done different things. One thing I'll do is I'll put just a box of foundation right above the brood, and then put drawn comb above it. And those bees, once again, the theory is they'll build that comb out to get up there to it. I've also put like 2 frames in the middle, like in a 10 frame box. You want to have 10 frames, and if you're using foundation, they'll draw it out wonky if you don't have 10 frames in there. And so I've done that, and it works pretty well. I think that's kind of the Gus Mitchell method that I've learned from him. But what Cayman does is I think goes 3 or 4 frames over, drops a frame of foundation. This is drawn comb. Like the box has drawn comb in it. And for those who may not know, comb is like gold when you're making honey. The bees will fill it up so fast. If you ever have honey, unless you want to just have crushed comb or whatever, just preserve that comb and use it again the next year. Don't scrape it off the frames, because then you're just, they're having to start all over when you do that. If you want to make a lot of honey fast, put drawn comb in there. But
Yeah.
trying to draw out foundation work. And I would encourage everyone to go watch Cayman's one of his, I think it was his most recent video if he hasn't dropped another one since
Yeah.
then. But he just takes a 10 frame box and and it's got comb in it, and he'll basically remove 2 frames. He'll put one, he'll scoot like 3 or 4 frames from the edge over and make a space and drop a frame of foundation in there, and then go 2 or 3 more frames over and do it again. And once again, it's that principle. The bees hate to have that empty space. And in a good flow, they'll draw that comb out in just days. They draw it out and fill it with honey so fast.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that checkerboard principle, but it's just a couple of frames. It's not like every other frame or whatever. And if you could do that in each box that you have, pretty quickly, you can end up with a lot of drawn comb that you didn't have before. Just beautiful new drawn comb that you can use year after year. And so that's a technique that I thought was pretty cool. And if you're taking 1 or 2 frames, if you're taking 2 frames out of every box, if you have, that's 5 boxes, then you'll have another box worth of comb that you can use. And so you can add another super. And so it kind of will help you keep you from having to buy so much foundation and just try and get it all drawn out at the same time. If you do it that way, you can just kind of gradually build your comb that way. And if you have X number of colonies with X number of boxes, you can just do the math at how quickly you can kind of increase your numbers doing it that way. But a lot of people, if you're a brand new beekeeper, you just got to put the foundation on there and they'll eventually draw it out. It just takes so much work for them to do that. It slows them down, kind of, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I have even pulled brood up above an excluder to get the bees to come up into some foundation. Just make sure you don't bring the queen above the excluder. I did that on one hive this year, and they made a lot of really beautiful brood in my beautiful supers.
Speaking of that, every year it seems like I found, when we're pulling honey in that summer harvest, it seems like I find a queen. Like I'll pull a lid off, I'll get down a super or 2, and I'll be darned if I won't have the most beautiful brood pattern in that honey box. Somehow either that queen I didn't shake her down, or somehow she, and when I pull, sometimes there's a little bit of brood in there when I put this queen excluder in there. And I think I think this happened to me this past weekend. I was at one of my bee yards and I was kind of going through and doing, kind of stacking the honey supers back on. And I didn't pull all my honey supers. I just pulled the ones that were ready. And so there's still a bunch on the hives. And I went down and I saw some brood. I'm like, what the heck? And I'm like, where is this darn queen at? And I think it maybe been new foundation that they had built out. And what I think happened maybe is some of that brood that she had started to build in before I put the queen excluder in. I think they might have made an emergency queen because she looked young. But she was laying it up. Beautiful brood pattern, just mainly on one of my medium boxes. So she really hadn't laid up the whole box. So I just caught her and I just walked her in the front of the hive. So if there's already queen in that bottom box, she'll be a battle royale. And if not, then maybe she's the queen and maybe she'll just take it over. But that's what I did. I didn't have time to try and go through and look and see if there's a queen in the bottom box. It was kind of late in the evening and just had to get it done. But it seems like there's almost always 1 or 2 bees, 1 or 2 boxes where when we're pulling that honey in June, we'll get down a box or 2 and all of a sudden we find a beautiful brood pattern, basically filling up 1 to 2 honey supers where I missed a queen somehow and she's in there. So that's all. That's not what you want to see, but it can happen sometimes.
Oh yeah.
The adventures in beekeeping, right?
Yeah. Always be prepared.
Let's see what we got here. We got another question from Dwayne Bittinger. Keith, can you speak more about using drone comb between brood frames and how that helps stop swarming?
Okay. Now he used, I don't have my glasses on, but he spelt that D-R-O-N-E, drone comb.
Yeah, drone. Did you mean drone or drawn?
Yeah, that's something a country boy, I've made videos about that. A country boy has trouble with, are we talking about drawn comb, D-R-A-W-N, or drone comb, D-R-O-N-E? I imagine he's talking about drawn comb, where I talked about I was splitting the brood and dropping in drawn comb between the brood. All you're doing there is just you're continuously trying to convince the queen that she's got plenty of room. So every time you go in the box, like I said, I do it more aggressive than what Greg Roberts said that you should do. He was splitting up 2 and 2 and putting 1 strong hive. The temperatures are warm. They're rocking and rolling. I'll split up every 2 frames of brood. I'll drop a drone comb in between them. And if I need to, I'll add another box. Now,
Yeah.
somebody asked earlier how many boxes that I used going in spring. Running all mediums the way I do, the brood box, which is about the same as a double deep. My really strong hives, I'll have a fourth medium. That'll be the brood area. Then that's normally the way I do it, either a 3 or a 4 medium boxes.
Brood box. Then you stack the honey supers on top of that. So you treat that like a regular, like you were saying, and you broke up a little bit there, but three mediums is about the same as 2 deeps, right? That's kind of what you're looking at. Or is, yeah.
So that's quite a bit of brood area. It seems to work well.
Yeah. Let's see right here. And once again, the principle of the drawn comb that's in between it's the same principle, kind of works even with foundation. If you're trying to dry out brood foundation, if once again, they just hate that. They'll draw it out, and you'll see those queens sometimes. They'll start laying before it's even drawn out completely. That blows me away. You'll have cells that are drawn out maybe 1/4 inch, and that queen's got it laid up, and then they just continue to draw it out and take care of those cells. When they're really in a good flow and that queen's busy, she'll put it wherever she can. And so that's another principle that works out pretty well. Let's see here. All right, another question here. What is your Varroa mite management program with strong colonies like that, Keith?
Okay. Yeah, now as usual, I do things a little bit different. It's kind of a theme going here. I don't do mite washes anymore.
Keith, you're breaking
with a pull-out plastic.
Hey,
are we back?
Start over. We lost you there. So you say you
Okay.
don't. Last I heard was you don't do mite washes anymore.
Okay, I use screen bottom boards on all my hives that have the pull-out plastic board like the political sign that I could clean off prior to doing my oxalic acid vaporization treatments. So after I do a treatment, I can count and see what the mite drop is. Now, in my opinion, but once again, this is my opinion, when you do an OA treatment like that and count your mite drop, it's almost like I'm doing a wash on the entire hive. I'm not just washing 300 bees in alcohol or a Dawn dishwashing detergent. I'm washing the whole thing. So if I can do an OA treatment and drop 10 or 20 mites out of a whole hive, that hive's in pretty good shape. But what I normally do is the 5 treatments spaced out every 4 to 5 days of OA, and then if I do have a hive that still has a big mite drop at the end of the 5 treatments, I'll continue treatments on that hive. Now, that's very rare. That just don't happen. Most of the time, your drops really drop. Your drops drop drastically. That's a tongue twister. When you do it that way. Now I don't know what the recommended dosage is these days for oxalic acid, but a friend of mine told me that he uses about 4 grams per brood box. So I don't know. That sounds like a pretty good number to me. But
when you say brood box, do you mean medium brood box, or are you thinking more on the line of deeps?
For a deep, so for a double deep, you would. I guess my friend for a double deep, he would use 8 grams. Yeah. So, we'll just leave it. We'll leave it at that.
Well, I'm going to tell you, and I might get kicked off the internet for saying this, but last year I used 4 grams per box, like single deep 4 grams, double deep 8 grams.
Yep.
I hit them twice, and deep and the medium, I would kind of go back and forth either way. And I think it really does a pretty good job. Mm-hmm. If it's, I never go more than 8 though. If it's got like a double deep with a medium, I just stick with the 8 at the most. But
yeah,
it does. Obviously, takes twice as long. Even if you're using the instant VAP and you're doing that, you got to hit it twice. Is how I do it.
Yeah.
and that's above the recommend. I think the dose now is approved for 2 per box. I think is what the approved dose is now. But I have had really good success, I think, with that. I just hit them hard, man. You know, to me, it's kind of strange with the OAV because, man, if you smell that stuff, if you get it in your lungs, it will absolutely, it's just
Ouch.
horrible.
Yeah,
It's
you
just
know it.
really, like, you don't want to breathe that stuff in. It's
No,
just toxic, man. It's
no.
horrible. However, um, the bees, it's almost like it's like within 5 or 10 minutes, they're just like
Mhm.
nothing even happened. I mean, they aren't real excited about it at first, but man,
No.
it seems like it's almost like initially they get a little feisty, and then if you crack the lid, like 5 minutes later, they're calm, and they're almost like
Yeah.
a drug to them. It calms them down. And so, and boy, within 15 minutes, you crack that hive, and you can never even tell you did that oxalic acid treatment. So it's pretty, I think it's really, as hard as it is on us if we breathe it, I think
Mhm.
it's very, very mild on the bees, and it's very hard on the mites. And so,
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. It don't seem to bother the bees much at all. But yeah,
uh,
don't breathe it. Don't get it in your eyes. Wear
no,
wear the right PPE and do it religiously.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it,
Uncle 60 asked a question here I guess, to piggyback on that. Do you only fumigate with, I guess, or vaporize with OA, or do you use any type of other OA treatments?
no, all I use is oxalic acid. Um,
The
I have,
vapor or the
yeah,
vapor?
the vapor. I used some Apivar many years ago, and it seemed to quit working for me. So, and I didn't like the fact of uh, uh, it kind of contaminated your supers and did some bad things, and I didn't like that part of it. So I've not used that in several years. But yeah, the oxalic acid, the screen bottom boards, counting the mite drop, doing the treatments, 5 treatments every 4 to 5 days. Uh, that's really working good for me. I'll do that probably late July, early August, and then I'll hit them again when I'm don't have much brood in the colonies. November, December, January, February. I might hit them 3 to 4 times once a month during the winter. But I just really hadn't had any mite troubles since I started doing it this way, and I'm not planning on changing it.
I
Works.
had a I had a bunch of Apple colonies. My hives are solid bottom boards. Typically, there are a lot of them on pallets and stuff. It's hard to. I probably could figure out some way to put like a sticky board or some way to count the mites, but with that. But I had some Apple colonies in my backyard a few years ago, and this was when Rob, before he had the instant VAPs, he just had the corded units that were really good, and I went out there. It was in December, and I had kind of neglected my hives in my backyard. It's always like you can see them, but so you just think I'll get them later, and I never do. But I think it was in maybe late November, early December. I just went out there, and I had the Apple colonies were pretty new. The hives were pretty new, and so they've got that tray you pull out. It's like a screen bottom board with a tray that you can put diatomaceous earth in it or whatever. And so I hit them with oxalic acid vapor, and I remember, I think they all had some mice, but one of them like probably dropped thousands of mites. I mean, the whole thing was just like dotted, like peppered with mites. It was crazy. And I did it. I think I did it once a week, and I just thought, well, I'll just see what happens here. The hive was a good, strong looking colony, but obviously it was infested with mites. And so I hit it another week and had another really big mite drop. That third week, the mite drop was significantly less. And I think I ended up doing like 4 to 5 weeks. And by the time I got to the end of it, there were almost no mites dropping. And here in Alabama, and even in the wintertime, there's some brood in the hives. They're never completely broodless. Very rare.
Mm.
If you have a deep Caucasian or Carniolan genetic, you might have some that brood way, way back and don't have any brood. But there is almost every hive I have in the wintertime still has brood in it here. It's not as much as it is in the spring or right now, but there is brood in it. And so, they're never broodless completely. And so that told me that if you hit them consistently for several treatments, you can knock the mites down and knock them way back. And I basically there were almost no mites dropping at the end of that. I think it was a 4 to 5 week span. Just doing them once every 6 to 7 days. It was like once a week. And so that was an experiment I did. Now I'm not saying it always works that way, but I know that hive was infested, huge, as someone would say, hugely infested. And it really seemed to work. I personally utilize several tools in the toolbox. I do use OAV mostly in the wintertime. I use Apivar some, and it didn't seem to work as well last year as it had previously. Last year I used Apicar, which is another natural, it's kind of like the OAV, oxalic acid. It's a natural part of, I have used formic a little bit. That's also another natural substance that you can use. The Apigard, though, you don't want to treat with honey supers on the hive. It just smells like it's just thymol. So you don't want your honey to taste like thymol. And it's been effective. And last year, that's mainly what I did. I also have Varroa strips in my colonies, and that's okay to use with honey on. And I'm trying that for the first time. And they're extended release oxalic acid strips. They're more expensive than the homemade ones that you can make, but it's just so logistically, it's so hard for me to get around and do OAV treatments on over 100 colonies, every 5 to 7 days for treatments. It's hard to do. And so I try to mix it up with some things that I can do. And I think my bees this year overall, as of, so far have looked as more healthy than ever before. But, I'm sure I'm behind now because every year I get behind. But that's kind of my strategy. I kind of try to use all the tools in the toolbox.
Yeah.
I have not noticed any negative effects from things like Apivar in the bees. And it's pretty mild on the bees and hard on the mites as well, historically. But something that's happening, I think, is some bees are becoming resistant to that because of all the use of amitraz products out there in the beekeeping world. And so, but I've also heard from the bee inspector and some other people that they may become resistant or it may not work as well. But if you wait a few cycles and you try different things, you can come back around in the future and use that again, and it may be effective. But everybody's still trying to figure out. The mites are very effective at adapting. But one thing about the OAV is, if you think about it, just kind of burns them up. It just kind of, so it's, how do you can't become adapted to that. Like you're not gonna, it's just kind of like us. If we breathe in gas, like poisonous nerve gas, we're never going to become adapt to that. And humans are never going to be able to breathe in that. So that's kind of how I look at OAV. That might be a crude way or not an appropriate way to look at it, but that's kind of how I look at it. It's actually something that destroys their bodies. And so they cannot tolerate that. Like they can. Other chemicals, like man-made chemicals you put in there, they might grow a resistance to that. So that's kind of why I think it's good to use those natural things that are found in nature a little bit better sometimes than the other things.
Yeah. You touched on something there too that kind of rang a bell with me as far as having the number of hives that you have. You're not able to go through and do an OA treatment every 5 days for 5 rounds and that sort of thing. And that's very true. That's one thing with where I'm at on hives, staying around. Well, I wanted to be at 25, but I'm at 35 now. But with that number of hives, I can do some things that somebody with 100, 200, 300 hives, they're not going to have time to do. You're not going to be able to go in every hive every 4 to 5 days and split up brood the way I do it on a couple of 100 hives. That just ain't going to happen. So some of the tricks I do, really work well for a smaller number of hives, so you can mess with them. You got time to do it. It helps being retired too, but there's no way I could do some of the stuff I do on a lot more hives. There's just not enough hours.
Comment section is hilarious. There's some funny stuff in there, but Russell Koopman did ask, Keith, do you have the battery operated vaporizer? Do you have the one?
No, I'm old school. I've still got the old corded Larabi vaporizer. My half of my hives are down close to my shop, and the other half are up close to the little farmhouse. And I've got power at both locations, so I just run an extension cord and just get out there and do it. Now, one of the guys that one of my newbies that I mentor, he bought one of the new battery operated jobs, and I used it on his hives, and now it's got me wanting one of those because it was definitely a whole lot faster than my corded model. It obviously has some hotter heaters in it than what my old unit has. So I might have to be investing in some more newer technology maybe at the expo this year. But
They are absolutely amazing. My favorite is the Instant Vap Compact,
mhm,
but the Instant Vap Lite is actually pretty dang powerful. It's less expensive and it's lighter weight, but it is a little bit slower, but not much. It just really, all three of them are incredible. But my favorite
yeah,
is the Compact. It's the super powerful one that's it's just got a light that flashes. You don't have to worry about the temperature and everything. The light goes solid, you know it's time to move on to the next one. But
yeah,
yeah, they're pretty cool. I think it's a great investment. But like you said, if you've got a plug right there close, I mean, it's the other one's pretty powerful. This corded one's pretty powerful as well. So, but for
yeah.
me, it's just I use the compact and the original, and I can go so fast, man. I just pop one in a colony, pop the next one in, and by the time I
Mm,
got that one going, then the next one's ready, and I just go so fast and just move. You know, you just get to a bee yard, you take the vaporizer out, you pop a battery on it, you just set it there and let it on both the units, let them warm up. Then you get your everything else ready, get all whatever you got to do to get ready, and then you just go to town, and it just goes so fast. But I have to be quick because I've got a lot of colonies. There is a let's see, I'm kind of going into questions on my phone here, but I've also got. Let's go on to the next thing. I think we have another topic here. Let's see. Okay, this is Russell Kootman says, and Russell, appreciate you being. Russell has been a fan. I've had him as a subscriber. I think almost since I started beekeeping and started the channel, maybe even back in
mm.
2014, but certainly since 2018 or 2019. And what a great person for the beekeeping community. And so thankful you're in here, Russell, as we are for everyone that's in the chat here tonight. You've been doing it for a long time. You're brand new at it. We appreciate you being here. Keith, are you thinking about bringing in some mite tolerant genetics into your operation?
Yeah, we might be breaking up a little bit now. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I got you. I got you now. Go ahead.
Earlier, my Shacktown mutts, they serve me well, and Varroa, the way I treat, it's not really a problem. It's working well for me, and, and um,
Yeah,
I
there's
think
nothing
the
wrong with. Go ahead.
well, no, I was just going to say I think having the local bees, they make it through winter good. Decent attitudes for the most part, make a lot of honey. Queen issues themselves. Um, I just try to set them up and let them do their thing. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, nothing wrong with that. And a lot of people say just get local bees and just breed from the best. And if they're pretty good bees, then just let them do their thing. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. I personally, I brought in some of the mite resistant bees into my operation. I brought some in as virgins, and I also brought some in as mated. And they just are a little more spicy. I mean, they just are. It's not that it's bad. It's just some people don't mind that, but I just tended to see a little more spiciness in them. And I'm not sure really how much more resistant they've been to the mites than my local bees or than the other bees I've had. To be honest, in my operation, my most mite resistant bees are the local feral bees that I've had. I think they're probably the healthiest as far as the mite resistance goes. But they just are. A lot of them are just sock staple. They staple the socks to your ankles, or they staple whatever they can to whatever they can staple it to. And so some of them are just over the top aggressive or feisty. And I don't mind treating, and I'm going to try maybe as time goes on to as I bring in the more gentle bees to find the ones that are the most mite resistant and just kind of breed from the best. And then ultimately down the road,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully I'll end up with a Randy Oliver situation to where a lot of his bees tend to be more mite resistant because he's bred the best of what he's got.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of my theory too now is, you know, I didn't just go out and kill all my queens of my feisty bees. But what I did was I made a lot of splits and put the queens I wanted in them. And so my thoughts are as you do that, there'll be more hives with the more desirable traits that flood the air with more drones. So over time, hopefully it'll just get better and better. And I'm finding that to be true. It seems like it's working out pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Great question, Russell. Thanks, man. Thanks for
Yep.
participating. And thanks for the support all these years. Um, Stone River Bee says, Keith, when preparing for a spring flow, how many brood boxes do you average per hive to prevent swarming?
Yeah, that goes back to where we were talking about. My normal is 3 mediums, which is about the same as a double deep. And if a hive is really strong, I'll add that fourth medium on there for the brood area. But the majority of mine have 3. I'll probably only out of what I'm calling my that I'm getting the honey off of, probably 3 mediums for the brood area. Or
Yeah. I had a I had a colony one time. I called it my mega hive. I'm not sure how many people remember that. People like Russell might. I'm not sure, but I had there's a guy up in Indiana. His name is Tim Ives, and he runs a 3 deep system. And then he basically just kind of stacks them up. And some of those his colonies are 10, 11, 12 boxes high. And I tried that. It was my third year beekeeping, I think, and that thing it brought in 315 pounds of honey, so that was pretty impressive. Um, so anyway, that was fun, but there's just so many different ways to do it. And what I try to do is just stay ahead of the bees with the supers. If they're packing out supers, I just try to get more on there and try to stay ahead of them. And so that's how I try to do it. Let's see here. Let's see. We got another question here. What is your opinion on old dark comb? How do you manage your comb?
excuse me. Um, it's according to how old and how dark it is. Most of my old dark comb ends up being in a swarm box, and the bees love it there. Um, I try to rotate it out, and that's what I do with it. I use them to catch swarms with. No doubt, the old dark comb, the bees don't like it. I've got a friend that I try to help with bees, and he's been a beekeeper for many, many, many years, and he's got some real old comb that he's got stashed in his garage. And it seems like every time when I'm not looking, he'll pull a box of that stuff out and stick on a hive that's doing good, and all at once it won't be doing good anymore. So I need to find a nice way to tell him to get rid of all that stuff. But he's a good fella, and he's actually the one that got me started in beekeeping. So I hate to fuss at him too much, but yeah, I do think the old dark comb, it definitely needs to be rotated out. I don't think the bees like it. I don't think they work as good in it, and from what I've seen, it's actually hard on the bees.
Yeah, there's all kinds of principles behind that, and I do have some that's pretty old and pretty dark. I think once it starts to be round instead of hexagonal shaped, it's time to get rid of it. And if it gets really black and really hard, they can't manage it. And I know it would be ideal to get it out of there every 3 to 4 years, probably at most. But I've got some that's older than that, and the bees, if they quit using it, then you just toss it. And I think a lot of mine I lose through attrition. I have a dead out, and the white moths get in that old stuff and they chew it up, or the frames that just look really bad, so I'll burn them or get rid of them. Sometimes when it's really old, people say, well, just reprocess your frames. But sometimes those old frames like that, you almost can't scrape it off. You can't get it out of there. It's so hard and firm, and they just need to be burned.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't have any particular number of years I keep it on there, but I do kind of try to eyeball it. If it gets too old and black and just the bees quit using it, then you know for sure it's pretty old. I know there's a concern also about the chemicals that get in it, in the wax can,
Yeah.
if you, and some people say they're organic, and maybe that's true somewhere, but I think most of us where we have our bees, there's going to be someone spraying something somewhere nearby. Most of my bees are in agricultural land. There's farmers all around. My bees thrive in that situation. I'm real hesitant to blame everything that happens to my bees on the farmers spraying. If because I may have a hive that dies out, but then there's a hive right next to it that's like 8 boxes tall that's just thriving. So A lot of people just try to, they blame everything on the farmers and on the people spraying in their neighborhood and things like that. I'm not like that. I think that we have to learn how to just, I think if we have good, strong bees and we manage our bees properly, we'll be okay. But there is, I think, processing your comb through is one way to really help the health of your colony. And I don't do as good a job of that as I should. But I think some people throw it out too soon also, though. I think there's a lot of used comb that can be utilized for years, that's fine. But you can tell lots of times it gets really old and dark and black and it's not pliable. That stuff probably needs to go. Let's see here.
Yep.
All right. Here's another question. You answered this earlier, but this Dodd probably came in a little bit late into the chat or wasn't in here at the very beginning when you were introducing yourself. How many hives do you have, Keith?
Yeah, I think right now I've got 35, probably are nukes, probably 2, 3, or 4-story 5-frame nukes. Stadiums, except for one that I'll have a video coming out on Saturday. So that's a whole nother story, though. You'll have to stay tuned for that. But that's the only deep box I've got in my operation.
Keith, we lost you for a second there. Go back and tell us about your numbers again. I'm sorry. We kind of got bits and pieces of that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get a new laptop. The vacuum tubes in this one are apparently getting worn out. But
you said 35 colonies and kind of broke it down for us. How much
was
it?
Yeah, 35 colonies. The majority of them are 10-frame. I've got one 8-frame that makes a lot of honey. And I think I've got about 8 nukes right now, either a 2-story, 3-story, or I've got a couple of 4-story 5-frame nukes. And of course, they're all mediums also. So the only deep I've got in my operation is one that I put a swarm in that I got out of the box yesterday, I believe. And I'll have a video coming out on that on Saturday. But I had to put my medium frames in a deep box because you'll have to wait and see the video.
That's right. That sounds they
did some amazing. Yeah, they did some amazing stuff. I actually kind of forgot about this swarm box, and I went by one day and it had a lot of bees flying in and out, and I'm not really sure how long the swarm had been in it, but they did some amazing work. So that's going to be a strong hive.
Man, a good motivated swarm is just a beautiful thing to behold, isn't it? What they can do. It's amazing what they can do in just a very short period of time.
Yeah.
Stuff. Let's see. This is a question that I have no idea. It says, I started experimenting with essential oils this year. Seems to be working well. Do you know any to avoid? I don't know that much about essential oils. No. I couldn't tell you. It's not my thing.
No,
I know a lot of people believe it and use it, but I've never utilized that. So,
no, I don't know anything about that.
I'm not the right person to ask for sure.
I can change the oil in your car, but I don't know much about oil in a beehive.
Yeah. Brian Lee, thanks for the super chat, my friend. Brian's a good friend of mine. He lives in Birmingham, and he's back and forth between Birmingham and Tallahassee quite a bit, drives right through Dothan here, and he's been by my house a few times, and I just appreciate you, Brian. But actually, he made these hats for me with my logo on them. I got this kind he's made for me, and then also got one right here. It just says, I don't know if you can see, it says brucesbees on it, just with my lowercase.
Very cool.
So Brian's become a good friend. But Brian says Keith Spillman equals legend, and I agree with that. Legendary, the legendary Keith Spillman, man. I'm honored to have you on the chat tonight, man.
No.
I had to get in line to get you on here, so I appreciate you coming on, man.
Oh, this has been fun, and thank you, Brian. I'll see you again at the expo. We don't get to see many times every year.
All right, my bees. This is okay. So here's a story. Lisa Grammy midwife, Lisa from Ozark, Alabama, which is just up the road about 15, 20 miles from here. I had some bees up in Ozark, not far from her, and Lisa would come visit me. And every time I don't know if it's the perfume she wears or if it's the soap she uses or what, but they would just light her up. My Ozark bees were known to have the nasty reputation, and they were bad enough for me. But when Lisa came, it's like they ramped it up about 6 notches, and it was just like, if you have a 5 on a 5 to 10 scale, she'd be up about 11 for Lisa. They would just eat her up. And it's kind of funny because I posted on Facebook a few days ago. One of my colonies has just got bees bearding all over it down at Appin Farm, just full of bees before I put the honey supers back on. And it is the flower hive, we call it. And that's a hive that used to just tear Lisa up. And now it's got nice bees in it in a better location, and they're not bad at all, and they're super productive. But poor Lisa, man. But my bees up in Ozark, I think, were just probably, they may have been within mating distance of her bees. I'm not sure as the bee flies, but she said her bees have chilled since I closed my Ozark yard, which that makes sense. If her queens were mating with my drones, then that makes sense why they would be mean. But now if I have bees up there, that would be nice, Lisa. I would promise I would have nicer bees up there. But anyway, I shut that thing down. I had a couple of years ago, my goal was to really tame those bees down, and I got a bead on some bees from Michael Palmer out of Vermont, and they came and kind of helped me get that arranged. And so I did. I got a bunch. What I did was I put them in the worst situation I could have. Though it was August, it was hot and humid and nasty, and I broke those hives way down. Didn't get a chance to feed them right away. It was a few days before I got them fed. Just introduced like 30 queens or whatever into those colonies, and I ended up with just a mess up there and lost most of my colonies because it was beekeeper error. And so came through this winter with like 4 or 5 colonies up there, and I'm like, I can't drive up. There's about 15-20 minutes from other bee yards, and so I shut it down and moved those colonies out of there, the ones I had. And so that bee yard is now, it doesn't have any. The year that I bought that piece of land, I moved the hives out of there. So anyway, but it's dormant right now. Maybe in the future I'll put some more up there if I ever go full time. But anyway, just long story short, that's what, or maybe a short story long, however you want to put it. But that's what happened up there with Lisa. But if you saw my Facebook post or Instagram post where I had that hive that was just covered with bees, that flower hive box was the one that some of those bees were in that just absolutely lit Lisa up there in Ozark at that time. It's pretty funny.
It's because she's so sweet.
Yeah, she is. I guess they. I don't know. Something they didn't like about her. They got after her. It was. I felt kind of. I always feel bad when my bees attack people. Honestly, I feel bad, but that's one reason I'm trying to change it. One reason I'm also working on that is because I'm interested in selling nukes, and I don't want to sell people bees that are not going to be desirable to work. I don't want to do that. I want to have good quality, gentle bees that they can use in their hives that aren't going to tear them up when they get a little bit big. And so that's kind of one of the reasons I'm trying to tame them down some too. And it's moved greatly in the right direction. My bees are much nicer than they used to be overall. And here's a question from Uncle 60. Do you need veterinary feed directive for doing OA applications? And the answer to that would be no. Uncle 60, you don't. I don't think it's legal. Like, you can just order it. You don't have to have a license or anything to order that stuff to get a hold of it and to utilize it. So I'm trying to see here. I don't know. We've probably missed some questions here, Keith, but man, what a great chat so far tonight. It's been a lot of fun. And I just got to tell folks, if you haven't met Keith, if you haven't seen his channel, you should go check it out. Keith has a really good way of just kind of explaining things. First of all, Keith is one of the coolest dudes on the planet, man. His introduction, he drives over on that half tracks on that big, what do you call that? What is that you're driving in your videos, Keith? What is that? It's
the half track.
Yeah, the half track. So he's got his introduction. He's driving a half track right over the camera. That just sets it up. You know it's going to be a cool video. And then you do a phenomenal job of explaining what you're doing. And I kind of got locked in on a couple of your videos this spring when you were adding the honey supers and explaining why and how you did it. You actually added them a little sooner and a little more boxes at a time than I usually do. But obviously it works. They filled them up and you've harvested 3 times already. So it's working for you. And I just, everything looks clean and uniform. Your boxes all look great. And you just got a really good thing going up there.
Well, I appreciate it. I don't really know any better. Some of the stuff I kind of make up as I go. Recent video I had, I'm playing around with something I'm calling super equalization. You ever heard that fancy word before? I just made it up. Where I'm moving supers around between the hives. I don't know if you've ever tried that or not. You know, the transfer bees that take the nectar from the foragers, when they come in, the foragers turn around and go right back out. But the foragers transfer the nectar to the transfer bees, and then it goes from bee to bee to bee to bee, and they add the enzymes before it gets put in the cell up into super. Well, these transfer bees are really just old nurse bees, so they really hadn't been out of the hive, so they don't know where they're at. So you can move supers around full of bees from hive to hive, and they get along just fine. I use it when, say if I've got a strong hive, they've filled up all the supers. Well, I don't want to pull 3 supers off and cram all the bees down below the excluder. I've got to have a super from somewhere. So if I've got a weak hive that has a couple of supers not quite full, you can just pull a super off of the weak hive and stick it over on the strong hive and keep getting it. The bees get along just fine. They never miss a lick. You can also use it as a tool to move workforce around. You can take a strong hive with a super plumb full of bees, and you can move that over to a hive that maybe needs some help. And of course, those transfer bees are going to graduate and turn into foragers. So as long as you make sure you got extra food in the hive, you're going to instantly make that hive stronger. So now I'm talking about supers. I'm talking about boxes above the excluder. There's no foragers up there. The queen's not up there. It's just transfer bees. So yeah, I mean, that's just something that I've been playing with this year, and it's worked out really good. So
yeah, that's, it's a myth that they say you can't mix bees between hives. One strategy that I learned years ago, my friend Greg Collins over in North Georgia, I went and hung out with him one time back, I think it was in 2015 or 2014. Back when I was a brand new, it may have been 2015, but he's up in the North Georgia mountains, and I was kind of startled because he had some little nukes. They may have been mating nukes or just regular nukes, and I remember a couple of them were sitting right next to each other. One of them was strong, and one of them was real weak. So he's like, he just switched places, and I'm like, you can't do that. I mean, you can't do that, can you, or whatever? I said, why are you doing that? And he said, well, they'll be fine. We need to strengthen this colony. The queen over here is real good, or whatever. She's laying it up. They'll catch up, and the one that we strengthened with bringing more foragers in. So the bees are going to do whatever is beneficial to them. If you've got bees coming back from the outside and from foraging, and they're loaded up with honey and pollen and resources, they're going to let them in.
Come on in.
Come on in. So that is one way. If you want to just increase population, you could just switch places. Yeah. Also, if you want to weaken a population, if you've got one that's too full that you're afraid, that's one way to kind of drop that population down. Particularly as we mentioned earlier in the chat, if you got a really spicy colony, you move that colony out of that area, move it to the different size part of the bee yard. There, you want to keep it close enough to where those foragers will not know where to go when they come home. They'll just kind of be lost a little bit, and then the bees that are actually in that colony, you set it maybe a few yards away, it'll be more workable, at least until they get another field force out there, because the foragers tend to be the guard bees, and the foragers tend to be the ones that are more spicy. And so that's another trick. But yeah, bees drift. They go from hive to hive more than you know. And it's not like if a bee comes in from another hive, they're just going to murder that bee. The time when they fight is when they are robbing. That's when you see them tying up, and when they sense there's a reason to defend the hive, then they will absolutely ruthlessly either try to take that honey, or they'll try to fend them off. Bees can be ruthless at times as well, but as long as everything's happy, they'll just say, "Come on in, bring us your resources, man. You're more than welcome to bring that honey into our hive for us."
Oh yeah,
it's pretty cool. Let's see. I've got a couple more questions. I think we may start to wrap it up here pretty soon, but that's a question, I guess, from me. We'll see what it says here. Yeah, this is about my queen supplier. Bruce, do you still like the Cordovan queens? I'm thinking about ordering some from Zach. Derek, I love my Italian Cordovan bees. They're a mix. They're not purebred, either one, I don't think, but they do have Cordovan/Italian bloodlines. I love them, man. They are very gentle. They're very productive. They're brood factors, but they also produce honey. They're not just producing bees and eating resources. They do produce honey as well. They also, I just really like them. But I will tell you this, excuse me. They are not super mite resistant, so you will have to treat it. You're not going to buy these bees and stick them in a box, expect them to be real mite resistant. they're not horrible, but they just need to be treated. And so I will tell you that. But I really like them. I'm a fan. And I will tell you also, for those that are interested in maybe getting queens, the if you got to order from him on Facebook, that's the only way I know to order. Heinzelman Apiaries, Zach Heinzelman, you can go to his page, or Heinzelman Apiaries in the Big Island in Hawaii. And it's a minimum order usually of 28. And so you need to either get a group of you up or need that many, because he's not going to send you just 2 or 3 queens. You got to order at least 28 queens from him. And during the summertime, sometimes I think like right now he may be running a pretty good special on them. But later on in the summer, like June, July-ish, that's when he has most of his queens available, and it's a really good time to order from him. So if you want to get some, I would at least reach out to him and see what he can do for you. But I've been so impressed with everything about his queens. They're not all perfect, but most of them really do well. And so I've been real happy. They're beautiful, kind of golden yellow bees. The heavy Cordovan genetics, have like that brown thorax up there, and they're just a beautiful orange or yellow color, and I really like them. But a lot of people prefer the Carniolas, the Caucasians, or whatever, and then a lot of people, frankly, just have the local mutts, and they do just fine for most people. So, but I do recommend, in my case, I've got probably over half of my bees are either his or genetics of his genetics, and I really like them. So, hope that answered your question, Derek. I appreciate it, man. But reach out to him if you got a question. He'll work you through it. Tell him you heard about him from me. And then here's a question: what is the best way to get fresh foundation drawn out to over super or under super? So that's the question I was going to ask you earlier, Keith, and I kind of forgot about it. So thanks for bringing that up, Tiny Creek. And this can be, we talked a little bit about drawing out foundation earlier, but I'm going to piggyback on that question. Maybe first of all, answer the question at hand, and second of all, do you over super or under super, particularly when you stack your boxes up, Keith?
I think there's some benefit to under supering. Early in the season, I'll do a lot of that. But as the season wears on, and I've picked up these supers for about the 14th time, I start over supering because I'm tired of messing with it. I think there is some benefit if you have a small number of hives. I think under supering, you put that drawn out super over the one that needs drawn out, and the bees are going to go through there, no doubt. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I think under supering is great until you're tired of doing it.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about that video by Cayman. If you're trying to draw out foundation, now if you're a brand new beekeeper or if you don't have very many colonies, then you kind of have to either over or under super boxes of foundation. But if you have some established comb, you can just put a couple of frames per box, and Cayman kind of spreads it out. He did a video just a couple of days ago, earlier this week, I can't remember what day it was, where he talks about how he draws his comb out. Cayman Reynolds, I go check that video out. It might be his most recent one, but it's really a good video.
Yeah, I think it is.
As far as like if I am trying to dry out comb, typically if it's foundation, if it's a full box of foundation, I'll put it underneath my comb, my drawn comb, because that way, like you said, Keith, they have to walk across it. They have to connect it. Sometimes they'll just walk across and put honey in that comb. If there's a big flow coming in, they just want to store that honey. They may not draw it out, but then sometimes they'll draw it out really nicely. Mm-hmm. But what tends to happen is they'll draw the middle out first. They'll draw the center out first. They may not get it all the way drawn out from front to back or from side to side. So you kind of have to check on it, maybe move some of those outside frames in. And it takes them a little while sometimes. In a really good flow, they'll pack it out really nicely. But if it's kind of a mediocre flow, or if you put too much drawn comb above them, they may just kind of draw it out enough to attach them to the box above them, and then just use that almost like as a highway to get that box above and put the honey up above. So you got to kind of play with that. But I would definitely recommend anyone that wants to see how to get comb drawn out, maybe just check out Cayman Reynolds' video on how he does it if you have some established drawn comb already. As far as just standard supering up my boxes, and most of mine is drawn comb, I just kind of over super, honestly. I just start stacking them on top typically, and that's how I do it. Now, I did this just recently. I kind of reversed some things around a little bit. When I pull my spring harvest, I go through my hives 2 to 3 weeks, a week, try to be a week or two in front of the harvest, and I go through and I prep them for the harvest so I can just pull that spring honey off, because I don't pull everything in the spring. I just pull the stuff that I think is ready to go at that time. So I go through and I move anything that is ready to be pulled to the top, either one or two boxes usually, and everything else just drops down. And so that's kind of, in a sense, under supering, even though that some of those boxes may have some honey in it. And then when we go to harvest that spring, pull that first spring harvest off, which we did last weekend, I put a check mark on the boxes we're going to take. And then we just put the fume board on, take the box, and just go. You can go real fast that way. You don't have to sort through everything and try and figure it out. And it's if you got just a few colonies, it's one thing, but we pulled 64 boxes. And so it was a pretty busy day, but it's nothing like what our summer harvest. We may pull around 200 boxes for our summer harvest. So we pretty much take everything above an excluder, the summer harvest. Hopefully it'll mostly be full, and we just take it all. Okay. Thought of one more question for you, Keith. If you're pulling honey, what is your thought? What are your thoughts when it comes to capped versus uncapped honey? I'm gonna put up a can of worms here. I'm putting up a beehive.
Yeah. The way it works for me, when the flow hits here, it hits so hard that the nectar comes in, and to me, the bees don't have time to cap it. They just fill up the supers and go to the next one. That being the case, most of the honey that I pull is uncapped. Not all of it, but a lot of it is uncapped. Now, I always check the moisture on the boxes before I pull them, to make sure what I'm getting into. The enzymes have all been added by the time the nectar gets to the cell. It's just a matter of drying it down at that point. So my boxes, I've got a little drying room set up. I've done a couple of shorts and videos on that. I've got a drying room set up in the breezeway at my house where I can drop the moisture a couple 3 points in a couple of days. So if I pull it and it's a little bit over 18, say it's running around 19, it's not a problem. I can put it in my drying room, and if I'm not careful, it'll be down around 15 by the time I extract it. But by harvesting the uncapped honey, it definitely is a whole lot easier to extract because you're not having to deal with cutting the cappings off. On the downside to it, I don't generate a whole whatever. I don't generate a whole wax to coat new foundation with. I don't generate enough to coat the frames that I use. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm. So that's where I am.
Yeah, when it comes to that, typically the spring harvest, I try to make sure my goal is to have it mostly capped. Now, I will tell you this, there's a test I use called the shake test, and many people have heard of that, where you turn the frame up on its side and you force it down really hard. And if that honey rains out of there, if that nectar rains out of there, it's too wet. If it's like water, it's too wet. But our spring honey is so dry sometimes it's almost hard to get it to even extract very well, or to drain or to strain when we're trying to harvest the honey. I think we tested some the other day. It was 16.5%. And it was not, and some people would say, some people, I don't know, like it's like a badge of honor if your honey is extremely dry. I'm not sure. Sometimes it can be too dry, in my opinion, if it's too thick and too dry. But and a lot of that, a fair amount of it, most of it was capped. I try to pull mostly capped honey in the spring because I know I'm coming back later to harvest some more. And if I don't think it's ready, I just don't pull it. But when we pull those boxes up, I make sure that usually the box is 89% capped most of the time. And we pull it. Now, when we come back in the summertime, down here, the Chinese tallow, aka popcorn trees, a lot of people in the South here call it. It is more of a wet, like the moisture content is a little bit more in that honey. And it's kind of like what you said, Keith. They bring it in so fast. Sometimes I don't have a chance to cap it. But we do leave it on there. We leave it on there a little bit longer than usually it's a week or two after they're done bringing it in that we actually pull it. And I still like to do the shake test. And I've found that if I shake it hard and no honey comes out, I don't know if I've ever had any that was over that 18.5, 19%. Normally it's in the 17, 16s and 17s usually. And so I have never had really an issue with it. Some people say the tallow honey is super wet and it will ferment. Knock on my countertop right here, I've never had any honey that I know of ferment. Some of it obviously is a little bit wetter than others. I don't get as concerned about it as a lot of people do. Now, if I start having honey, start having buckets blowing the tops off or bottles that ferment, then I'll get concerned about it. But to me, I don't get as worried about it. I like to see my honey. When I say 89% capped, what I mean is either look at the frame or the box. Because as you know, sometimes you'll pull a box of honey and all the frames will be 100% capped except the outside too on each side. And many times even the outside frame on the inside will be capped, the outside won't be. Or, but if I look at a box of honey and the middle 7 to 8 frames are all capped, the outside frames aren't, then that's 80% to me capped. It's not a problem. I kind of look at the overall average.
Yep, it'll average out.
We did buy a dehumidifier last year, and we put it in the honey house that before our summer harvest or during our summer harvest. And it's not really airtight, but even in I think my buddy Rusty pulled that humidifier, that dehumidifier filled up like I think 5 or 6 times during that night. And I think it actually pulled it down a little bit, like a half a point or a point, even overnight in a building that wasn't even airtight. And it's very humid down here. So it's pretty effective. If you can, there are ways to bring that moisture content down, but I don't get as bent out of shape as a lot of people do about the moisture content. And if it's 16% versus 17%, I personally don't think, you're a better beekeeper, your honey's better than mine. Now if mine's like 20% and yours is 17, 16, 70%, then obviously you're in a better situation than me probably. But there's like a competition. It's kind of funny to me how people are like, mine measured 15% and, everybody's comparing. And I'm like, I don't really want mine to be that dry. I want mine to be usually 16, 17% because at 15, 16%, man, sometimes you can't even get it to hardly move through the equipment. It's just so thick sometimes. And so, but that's just me. Everyone to each their own. And I'm not being critical. I just think that, everybody does the best they can and we just kind of move forward. Just need to make sure it's below the acceptable range or around that acceptable range or below. And any honey that's in that situation to me is good enough. I got a super chat here from Lisa, Grammy's midwife. Grammy Midwife's Hives and Homestead. Grammy lives real close to me here, and she is a good friend of mine. And she sent a 1999 super chat. We really appreciate it. For anyone who is not that familiar with YouTube and how it works, if you're not a creator, these super chats and super stickers, and then they also have the super thanks you can do on regular videos on people who are monetized really help. Keith, I'm sure that, you've dealt with this, the work that goes into trying to set up a video and trying to shoot the footage and then trying to get it in a presentable form and actually get it uploaded. It is a lot of work. And so anything that you can do to help creators, not whatever the genre, whether it's me or anyone else in anything that you do, someone you really like, it really is helpful. If you can spare a couple of bucks to help them out, it really does help. And so, because YouTube, people say, man, you're making a lot of money on YouTube. Well, I promise you, it's not. I do okay, but for the work that I've put in over the years, literally thousands of hours of editing and trying to do stuff, it's nice. It's a nice little shot in the arm, but it's not that great. But we appreciate whatever you can do to help us out. Just being here in the chat is just awesome. We appreciate all the support and comments and thumbs up and all the support. Whatever you can do is just awesome to have this community together tonight. But thanks a lot, Grammy. Thanks for the comment. Great chat tonight. I agree. It was great because I had Keith on. And so we appreciate
this has been fun. Sorry about for the laggy trouble that I have. I'm going to have to invest in some better hardware. But this has been great. I enjoy this.
It was fine, and we really appreciate it. So I guess we'll kind of start to wrap it up. Keith, if you have any final thoughts for us, kind of tell us your channel, so folks can go subscribe to if they haven't before, and just talk about your channel a little bit once again in review, and then tell us what you got coming up in the next few days.
Yeah, the channel is Half Tracks and Honeybees. I do lots of shorts. The shorts are just the crazy stuff I get into on a daily basis, whether I'm playing at the creek or messing in the woods, taking the dogs for a walk, whatever. The the videos can be beekeeping stuff, how I do things, half track stuff, Jeep stuff, Fairlane. Half track stuff. So, but it's pretty varied. My content is that probably hurts me a little bit on the YouTube algorithm because I don't do one specific. So that's kind of where as for what I'm doing the next few days, I might be pulling my supers next week to see what we've got. The flow is about over with here. So might go ahead and do that. Be thinking about mite treat. August. Big thing we'll be looking for in the my back is next. There'll be a robin season. Everybody's that's something you have to be careful of doing inspections or whatever you're doing. Don't leave. Get in and out as quick as you can. That's where we'll be before too long.
That's right.
So that's it. I've had a great time. I appreciate the questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, Keith. I appreciate you coming on, and we've had some great questions, some great conversation, and I just got to tell people, I mentioned it early in the chat, for those may have hopped on later, Keith is just like one of the coolest. He just does a lot of cool things, man. He's just out there. Like you said, his channel covers a lot of different things. He's got the half tracks. He's got the dogs. He's got the bees. And he just, got that ponytail, man, just out there just being cool. That's he just everything. I think everything Keith does, even the way he talks, is just cool. So if you want to kind of hang out with someone that's cool, Keith is the guy to hang out with. Super nice. I met Keith at I think the Hive Life conference actually probably three or 4 years ago, and I've gone ahead and seen him at the expo the last couple of years, and wonderful wife, just great folks. And if you get a chance to check out his channel, subscribe to it, follow him, I think you'll enjoy the content. But there's just a cool vibe about you, what you do, Keith, and we appreciate your contribution to the beekeeping community. As far as here in Southeast Alabama, we pulled our spring harvest this past weekend. We ended up with, I think it's 170 gallons, whatever 34 5-gallon buckets is, 64 supers of honey. On average for me, typically when I pull a medium box of honey, it usually is a little more than probably about 3 gallons, 2.5 to 3 gallons of honey. So we get a little more than a 5-gallon bucket out of 2 supers that are reasonably full. If they're packed out like 8 frames, like sometimes I run 8-frame configuration in there, and they make them really fat and thick, and those boxes are heavier actually than a 10-frame box full of 10 frames. But on average, we get a little more than a half of a 5-gallon bucket, a little more than 2.5 gallons per box. And so I kind of figured, 64 boxes, 34 buckets is what we ended up with. Some of the boxes, the bees had actually, I think, started eating some of that honey because we had a dearth. It just dried up for about 2 to 3 weeks, right when I thought we were raking it in. And now the honey flow is back on. The tallow is blooming. And they are just as happy as they can be right now. In the couple of bee yards I've been to, it's almost like over a 2 or 3 day period, they just went from nothing to just fire hose, just pouring it in the hives. And so it's so impressive. If you go to my Instagram or YouTube or Instagram or Facebook is Bruce Jenny, JENNE, and Instagram is BMan Bruce. I posted a little reel. I did a little reel yesterday, 3 days after I put 2 boxes of honey back on this colony out at Apple Farms here in Southeast Alabama. The top box, I put 2 supers that we had extracted from, put them back on that hive, and the top box is almost full of nectar again. So
wow. That's awesome.
3 days. So that tallow flow is rolling. So we're excited. Don't have a lot going on as far as hive manipulations or hive management right now, just kind of letting them rock and roll. Kind of like what you mentioned, Keith. If I got a box that's just packed out with bees, and they need a super, and then I got another hive that's not doing much, there's no bees hardly in the super, I take that super off the weak one and put it on that strong one because I want them to fill it up. I don't want empty supers when we harvest in June. And so some of those colonies have been strong and they get weak. Maybe they swarmed out. Maybe they're, I don't know, for whatever reason, having issues. I don't have a lot of time to go through and try and fix everything right now. So I'll just kind of mix and match. I kind of, in a sense, it's going to sound kind of bad this time of year, but I take from the poor and give to the rich. You know what I mean? I want those really healthy 5 talent beehives we've talked about on the stream team. I want those to be able to double and triple and just do everything they possibly can with their resources. And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm also dabbling in queen rearing a little bit. I did it for the first time last year, and I've got some right now I'm playing around with. Not really shooting video of it because I'm trying to figure it out and just haven't really had time. Queen rearing is so time sensitive and is so kind of hard for me to figure out. I'm trying to, I can do a lot of things really well, but that's one skill I have not developed very well yet. So maybe if I can get it kind of figured out in the future, I'll do some more videos on that. But that's kind of what I'm doing right now. Not a ton of video stuff going on, a little bit here or there, maybe some shorts, some reels, some things like that, and maybe a few full-length videos. I do have a video coming out. I'm working on the editing right now from our honey harvest. We had a wonderful time, but it was like a warm-up for our summer harvest, so it'll be a lot of fun. But anyway, once again, Keith, thanks for coming on tonight, and thank everyone for joining us. I know that most people expect the stream team on Wednesday nights, but Greg and Brian were both out of pocket. They couldn't make it on tonight, and they needed to take care of some things. And so I said, hey, I'll hop on, and I called it, or I messaged Keith, and he said, let's do it. And so here we are. And once again, I appreciate you hanging out with me for a couple hours tonight, Keith.
It's been great. I enjoyed it.
I'm going to try to remember and not butcher this. One thing that Greg always says, one of the things we try to do with this whole community is be a lighthouse for those around us. And so, I just encourage everyone to kind of be the change that you want us to see. What is it? Be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. Appreciate y'all being on here tonight, and y'all take care, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Y'all take care.